welcome to this webinar set up by Anzu. Topic is one that's close to, I think, everyone's heart, especially for those of us who are, steeped into media and data and tech. Measurement is already a complex question, and measurement in gaming is even more complex. And so, today, I'm thrilled to welcome four experts. I um, I think we'll do introductions as I put out questions to the panelists. Please feel free to introduce yourselves. I have some really cool fun facts about each panelist, and so as I ask them the questions, I'll share with the audience some of your incredible facts. And so with that, why don't we get started? I think my first question is probably to all of you. Um, First off, definitely introduce yourself. Giving the attendees a glimpse into what you do at your companies. And then more importantly, would love to have your view about how gaming has really become this must-have advertising medium. Um, Maybe Kevin, I get started with you and then we move on.
Yeah, it sounds great. Hey, everyone. My name is Kevin Villatoro. I'm a partnerships lead at dentsu, and I work with our key media partners to bring strategic and innovative opportunities to dentsu clients. And I started to become very interested in the gaming ad space around 7 years ago. I was playing Final Fantasy 15. I love RPGs, and I was exploring a forest, and I stumbled on a campsite with a branded Coleman tent and Coleman camp chairs. And I thought, wow, this is a great example of a non-endemic ad. So non-intrusive, suits the environment perfectly. And fast forward to the pandemic times, and then I started to see a lot more interest in the gaming ad space, specifically from non-endemic brands. So when I say non-endemic, think like your CPGs, your QSRs, your finance companies, basically companies that are not in the gaming space, using gaming as a medium to promote ads. And so that was interesting for me. And at Dentsu, we took note of that. And because so many clients were asking about gaming, we actually had to organize a group of subject matter experts to support all the client interests. And we call this group Dentsu Gaming. And they have become such a valuable resource to help clients navigate this space, especially because gaming sits between so many different channels. Is it programmatic? Is it social? Is it video? It's kind of in between. And I think that's where the big opportunity is for clients. And they're starting to see that more and more. And certainly we've had to keep up with that demand with the team I just mentioned. So I would say now it's more popular than ever.
Perfect. Who would like to go next? Prasad, Narasa, Latish,
Sure,
whoever. Yeah.
I can go next. So I'm Prasad Abnave. I work with IPG agency. I'm currently based in Dubai, UAE, and I've always been interested in technology, right? And that's why like media technology has been evolving so fast, is evolving almost every day. And now with in gaming ads, it's like a new avenue for advertisers to actually showcase their products in a non-intrusive way with partners like Anzu. So I think in the region where I sit, there are so if you look at Middle East, KSA is one of the biggest audience that sits in KSA, and they have about 65% of them really identify as gamers, right? And all the advertisers here are actually looking at how do we tap into these gamers. Right, so I think that's where my interest lies in, and we've been testing a lot of platforms along with Anzu to really tap into these gaming audiences.
Oh, I can go next.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different entry into the gaming space. My name's Narissa. I lead the global sales org here at Anzu. When I joined Anzu in early 2023, I met with Itamar, who's our CEO. And I sort of said to him, look, I'm not a gamer. I don't know gaming. You know, I guess you could say I was a casual gamer. I was a Clash of Clans girl, Candy Crush on the phone. Didn't really think that I was a good fit for gaming. But he said to me, look, what we need is someone who knows how to sell ads. Someone who can take the great work that Anzu's done in terms of working with publishers and bringing AAA games to the table and being able to monetize that. And I said, I'm your girl. But, and there was a but, we need to be able to build out a tech stack to be able to sell that efficiently to agencies and clients. And that's everything from attribution to incrementality to third-party data measurement solutions. He agreed, and that's what we did. And I think that for me has really represented the evolution of intrinsic in game, is the ability to be able to take games into an advertiser's world and align against their measurement structures and be able to talk in a language where we sort of translate the gaming terminology into something that advertisers can understand and want to be able to buy and interact with. So really taking that value, that nomenclature, and aligning that against an advertiser's norms. And I think that's, for me, the most exciting part of gaming and how quickly it's evolved over the last 2 years, for sure. So I can honestly say now, after just over a year and a half at Anzu, I'm now a console gamer. You know, we launched a console offering earlier this year, which was incredibly exciting. And I decided to buy myself a console and
Nice.
completed Hogwarts Legacy in 54 hours, which I'm told is pretty impressive.
Nice.
I was a Gryffindor, thank you. I'm now replaying as a Hufflepuff because apparently you get to go to Azkaban. So I think, you know, it just shows that, you know, the joy of gaming across mobile, PC, and console is not sort of aligned to any particular audience. You know, it's females, it's males, it's young, it's millennials, it's boomers, it's everybody is interacting in this way. And, you know, hopefully we'll get to cover some of that today.
Yeah. Letitia, I mean, Marissa, you went into in-gaming, which is going to be the focus of our discussion. Letitia, I would love for you to share more about yourself, and then we can get into the
Yeah,
meat
so
of- yeah.
I'm Laetitia, also a huge Harry Potter fan. And I'm marketing insight manager at Happydemics. My role involves analyzing our benchmark data that are built from over 5,000 brand lift studies. And then I uncover trends and insights. Of course, among this amount, we've been running measurements for Anzu since 2023. And at Happydemics, as we use a unified methodology that gives us a broad view of the media landscape, and it allows us to compare campaign performance across all media channels, including in-game, of course. Over recent years, I've noticed a rising appreciation for in-game advertising and also a significant advancement in measurement capabilities for in-game metrics. So we are really going forward in regarding in-games measurements. In fact, consumer perception of in-game formats, for example, has improved by 1.4 times in 2024 compared to 2022. So it really is thriving and capturing attention effectively nowadays. So it's a really great change on the way.
Awesome. I already see some comments in the chat, which I'll get to shortly. Let's get the discussion started. I love how detailed your introductions were. I wanted to share some fun facts about all of you, where I think it'll add more dimensions to each of you for sure. Where, you know, Narissa had shared with us that she had made her off-Broadway debut 2 years ago, singing, which is incredible.
I'm not going to sing now, just for clarity.
There may be a question later on which will ask you to sing probably, but let's see. Prasad had mentioned that he loves to build high-speed race drones, which is incredible, Prasad, because I remember a couple of years ago at CES, that's all that was, everyone had these goggles which
Yeah,
I wear, but they were beautiful, and I guess you could really immerse yourself in the racing.
it's an immersive experience. It feels like you're flying yourself, right? So, and I love to build drones. I love technology.
That's amazing. Kevin had said that I mean, this could be an inspiration for people in the audience right now. Where 2 years ago he proposed to his fiance 50 feet underwater scuba diving.
I'm
My
not gonna
God,
lie, it was a lot of work. It took me months to plan. But if you're an adrenaline junkie and you like scuba diving, maybe it'll work out for you. It was a lot of fun though.
amazing, amazing. And Letitia, who through the conversation is going to be very, technical and very focused, she is a hip hop dancer. And she performs at this annual showcase every year. I wish we had a show and tell
With the
section to this
very
conversation, but
power.
maybe next time. But it's amazing. I love learning more about the panelists, and I think the audience is also probably taking note. So with that, I wanted to go into the core of the discussion, and it's somewhat aligned to the comments that I'm seeing in chat about, there's gaming, there's in gaming, and then there's intrinsic in gaming. Um, what what are the differences? What How would you describe these three categories, I guess? And why is it important to really categorize games as such?
Yeah, I can get us started there. I think, everyone knows Anzu focuses on intrinsic in game, but I think some of the challenges in this space is that when people think of gaming, they're thinking of different things. And you have to be very specific. There are different types of formats available depending on what your campaign objectives are going to be. So, of course, we know rewarded videos, for example, interstitials, and then there's, of course, native formats that are embedded into the look and feel of the game, which is what we know of as intrinsic. The fact is that gaming is still developing in terms of its advertising proposition. I think, us aligning against agency metrics is key. But I also think that, and I think someone made a comment on this, so thank you. I think it's very important as well that we continue the education and look at being able to forge our own metrics within the space to further education and understanding of how to evaluate the efficiency and the impact of using any gaming sort of format within your overall media plan. But for me, I think, the fact that people still get confused as to when to use rewarded video, when they should use intrinsic, how to plan and sort of measure this across your entire media plan just speaks volumes to the complexity that is perceived in the overall gaming space. Obviously, Anzu is focused on intrinsic, and the idea behind this is that we are trying to ensure that we are providing IAB compliant formats across display and video that brands are used to buying. We're also enabling those ads to be bought programmatically to make it easier to activate against those games that they want to and those audiences that they want to buy from. So, we have tons of games in our portfolio across mobile, PC, and console. And because of the easy access to programmatic, it means that you can also overlay other vendor type tags and pixels within your plan. So if you want to look at advanced measurement, for example, or specific demographic targeting via your DSP, that is now enabled within the Anzu sort of go-to-market and activation. But there are a lot of nuances within intrinsic in-game, particularly if you think about it as a 3D interactive world that moves around. If you're in a racing car and you're racing around a track at 100 miles an hour, then you're going to be going past ads. And it's really important that those ads are viewable and are viewable as defined by the IAB and MRC standards, which is something that we guarantee. So when we think about intrinsic, it's highly viewable, it's feels like part of the gameplay, it's not disrupting the gameplay, which is something that publishers really like, because obviously they want the players to be playing. But it's not just top of the funnel metrics. I think a lot of people think intrinsic, because of the nature of it not being clickable, that it is top of funnel only. And there's tons of research that we've done with Happydemics, with others as well, that just shows that the overall impact actually drives through the brand funnel all the way to purchase intent, and then has an impact on things like view through conversions, and of course, ultimately conversion. So being able to think about where in-game, intrinsic in-game is needed, how it came about, and why it's important as part of the overall media plan is something that we continuously focus on in our day-to-day and across our sales teams at Anzu.
I would
Yes,
love
I
an
think-
agency perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, right? So, as Narisa rightly mentioned, that these are basically native ads. Intrinsic in-gaming ads is more or less native ads, right? It's basically OH within the game, right? So we've tested, advertisers campaigns from Sony, and with, of course, with Anzu's tech. And they've shown great results. Now, obviously, these campaigns, as you mentioned, were non-intrusive, and they're in-game, so user doesn't really have to click on it. Obviously, it cannot click on it. But during the campaign period, we actually noticed that with the kind of audiences that the campaign actually got during the campaign phase on a specific product, they were really highly engaged audience. They eventually browsed through the product, information, ended up, so obviously, we can't really say if they ended up buying or not, but they, during the campaign, we actually saw really engaged audiences, and we did some kind of A/B testing to actually see what really worked and what did not. So I believe, with in-gaming ads, and specifically for Sony, they have products which are, so obviously we know Sony has console gaming products and also PC gaming products like headphones, specifically for your in-gaming experience. Also your monitors, which have really high refresh rates, and that's the campaign that we were doing. Right, so we saw really good success with the kind of audience that we actually reached with these campaigns.
Yeah, I just want to add one other piece from an agency perspective, and I actually double clicking on something that Narissa said about education and formats, and the space is seems complicated from the outside. It's because it kind of is. When I approach teams at Dentsu or clients at Dentsu, I have to give them like a 101, like a quick 101 before I even start talking, just assuming that they don't really know the space. And if they have activated in this space before, then they probably know it. But if they haven't, then I don't think they usually know it. And the one thing I do double click on when it comes to like intrinsic and just looking at that one word, for some reason this one word just inherently confuses teams. I don't know what it is. If you throw intrinsic in front of anything, you just need to properly define it. And one way I do it, and I just keep it super simple for teams, is I just describe it as a digital out-of-home placement with certain creative considerations to consider. But we can talk more about that later.
So I want to repeat two things. I love, Prasad, how you described it as native ads, because for standard media, not standard, non-gaming media planners, understanding that these are native ads is a good way to map it to the rest of the media structures, if you will. And Kevin, I appreciate your out-of-home reference. Again, my next question is going to be about integrating gaming, if you will. So, currently with the average block rates being so high, and with streaming and skippable videos and all sorts of formats and tools that are sometimes even enabling consumers to just skip ads, intrinsic gaming is is a great attention getter, if you will. And so my question to all of you, whoever would like to take it, is just what are some best practices around integrating gaming into the overall media mix? And that's the only reason I brought up the native ad element, the out of home element. Like these are aspects and formats that media planners and buyers are used to. Gaming is still seen as this different medium, if you will. So what would be some of your best practices for everyone listening in and whoever will listen to the recording, if you will, about integrating gaming into the broader media mix?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not just seen as a different medium, it's literally seen as a different channel for some teams, which is wild
I
because
hate
some of
that
these
as
teams,
well. I hate it
yeah,
when people refer to gaming as a separate channel, you know?
it really isn't. As we've talked about earlier, the entry door is so easy to walk through, right? Teams are already buying programmatically. And just stepping back a little bit, people are spending a lot of time playing games. We know that. Anyone who plays games know that. It's a $320 billion market. And from an agency perspective, I see a lot of large non-endemic brands in this space, but there's also several roadblocks that prevent more brands from testing and engaging in this space. And as I mentioned before, it's often because of a lack of education. A lot of these brands think it needs to be like a heavy lift. They think that gaming needs to be a big activation. It needs to be like sponsoring a Counter-Strike or esports tournament or building their own game in Roblox, maybe. And all these things cost multiple millions of dollars if they were actually to pursue that. Versus the reality is the entry point's easy. They can have a smaller budget, test programmatically, and a lot of brands just don't realize this is an option. And then they can take it a step further. And this is something that some brands at dentsu are doing is they're taking data from specific places like Walmart. If they know their customers are shopping at Walmart and they know their customers are buying X, Y, and Z products, they can use that as targeting, overlay it, and then activate via the trade desk or Walmart DSP or wherever they're used to buying. And I think that's very powerful because it's layering on a sort of targeting that they're used to as a best practice for other types of formats, but they're also testing a completely new environment, a new placement.
I think add on to that, right? When we are actually making a strategy for any campaign, or for example, let's say a product launch, right? So what are we looking at? So I think a brand is ideally looking at, maximum awareness, maximum reach. Now, how do we get this incremental reach? So when we as planners, we look at different platforms, different media mix that we can do, right? So with in-gaming inventory that we have, I believe the audiences are really engaged there. So there has been a lot of research in terms of how users are interacting with the games. We know for a fact they are highly engaged audience. Right, so that's where it is easier for any brand to actually make that decision to be in game. If there's inventory available in game, let's have our ad there, right? So I think that's where we can have that in the media mix, have that incremental reach of your right targeted audiences. Also, we know for a fact that a lot of audiences right now who are gamers are really young audiences for our Gen Z audiences, which we really want to target, right? So it's a healthy mix of incremental reach of the targeted audiences, engaged audiences, and that's where we really it really fits well into our strategy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The only thing I have to add on that is that I think standardization is key. How each agency goes about it is everyone's forging their path for the first time. So of course, there's no sharing in between agencies. So I think it really does call for some sort of gaming body or I don't know, the IAB or I don't know who, but someone needs to think about standardization of how to plan for gaming in the media mix. You know, we know that intrinsic in-game has a unique opportunity and role to play within the media mix, particularly when we think about who's playing these games, when they're playing these games, and the natural attention levels that the players have when they're playing games. You know, there's been plenty of research. I was talking about this at the upfronts last week in London about it. So it's key to know that there is a place, but I think a lot of the time people just don't know when or how or what the best practice is. So again, it just comes down to education. And I think a key part of that is defined metrics for each of the different formats within the media mix, and also the power of when and how to use rewarded video or skippable ads or intrinsic in-game. You know, one thing that we're doing a lot of at the moment is really thinking about retargeting strategies. There's an awful lot of reach available in the gaming space, an awful lot of reach. You know, mostly millennials, zillennials, Gen A. We have a lot of those in our network, as do other gaming providers. So when we think about, you know, building brand loyalty over the long term with, you know, younger audiences, gaming is a natural fit in that plan. So when we think about big brands that are trying to drive awareness, but also trying to push consumers to a point of purchase, there are retargeting strategies that you can do within the DSPs that we are integrated with that allow you to be able to do that. So I think it is a little bit of sort of standardization that's needed from a central body to achieve that.
So I love how engaged this audience is, and so many of you are adding key points in your chat. So I'm just going to bring one of them into our question. The integration is obviously important. I know Anzu has done a lot of studies with dentsu, with Happydemics, with others, studying the impact of what in gaming, or not in gaming, intrinsic in gaming can bring to other media types. I would maybe Anzu and Narissa and Letitia could pick this up. One of the points I just saw in the chats is, why wouldn't a brand want to use gaming as a channel for incremental reach across first-party data and retail media networks? This could be a question for now, or maybe, you know, offline if Anzu wants to pick it up with with Brendan. So
I'll happily answer Brendan's
yeah,
question.
so
I mean,
why don't we get started with the study bit first, and then
yeah,
Larissa, if
sure.
you want to speak about, yeah.
So you're right, we have done a lot of research with our friends at Happydemics and a few others as well. And, you know, overall, from the results of the multiple research studies we've done since I've been at Anzu and before, it's very clear that intrinsic in-game outperforms traditional channels in terms of attention, in terms of engagement. We know that players are fully immersed into a Hogwarts Legacy or whatever game they're playing. It's also non-intrusive. There is no way I could have completed Hogwarts Legacy in 54 hours if there were ads in Hogwarts Legacy. But if there were ads that were disrupting that gameplay, it would take me a lot longer. I may have been fed up with it and turned it off and not wanted to engage with it. So we know they're non-intrusive. We know that there's a way in which in-game ads can drive impact both up and down the sales funnel. But again, I think, you know, there needs to be a lead on education to prove that intrinsic works. And I think each agency or client needs to do that testing. I think A/B testing against other channels, we see it time and time again. If you look at CTV or traditional linear TV, we work with a few partners in that space to be able to prove the incremental reach factor of adding intrinsic in-game to your plan. So I think, like, I encourage anyone who's listening to go read that research. You know, that there's a few out there. I think maybe we can, yeah, thank you. We've linked it in the chat. You can go check it out for yourselves. In answer to Brendan's question, I think he probably means, like, why wouldn't a brand do it? You know, why wouldn't you want to be able to utilize gaming as a channel for incremental reach? we already know how much reach is available in the gaming space. So, you know, it's a natural audience extension sort of opportunity on your media plan. And it's easy to activate because you can do it programmatically. So very easy to set up via a PMP deal or a PG deal. And yeah, that would be my answer for Brandon. Thank you, Brandon.
I'm on mute. Would you like to speak to the study, or Dentsu, would you? And I quickly want to recognize Alexander in the chat. He's putting, I'm assuming it's a he, sorry, putting in some really cool best practices. So keep them coming. I'm sure we can summarize them post webinar. Letitia, sorry, over to you.
Yes, jumping in on regarding the study and what were the highlights of it. So we actually analyzed 110 in-game brand lift campaigns. And actually, of course, in-game truly excels in critical areas, like Narissa said, like I recall in brand attribution. It's clearly standing out from other digital media when it comes to capturing attention. So within a media mix, for example, whenever you want to reach the highest attention, it's a really great media to use. First of all, in this study, we saw that ad recall for in-game ads is 13 points higher than the average for other media. So it's really a significant difference, and it remains consistent over time. I'm looking at these figures quite often, and it doesn't really move. So it indicates really how highly memorable this format is and how it keeps consumer attention effectively. Second, and what we have not really highlighted yet, is the fact that in-game performs really, really well in terms of brand recognition, or as we call it, also attribution. So within in-game ads, consumers find it way easier to recognize brands compared to other platforms, and that's also the benchmark saying it. Finally, what we can say is that the appeal of in-game ads contribute to really to a powerful downstream effect on metrics like consideration and purchase intent. So, of course, regarding also the media mix that we were talking about, it's really interesting to use in-game measurements whenever we want to reach a bottom, sorry, funnel objective. So we found, like Narissa said, that in-game ads drive purchase consideration 5 points higher than the average for online media. So it's really great. And we can say that it's because it's a non-intrusive nature of ads, it leads to a higher ad likability and a more positive brand experience. So that significantly impacts business KPIs. So people are feeling closer to the brand and are feeling, yes, more proximity. So for advertiser, in games is really perceived as a high quality format that resonates well with consumers, and being seamlessly integrated into Hogwarts Legacy or other games. They reach people during moments of focus engagement. So they enjoy the interaction with the brand because they chose to interact with it. So, well, it's talking about the strength of in-game. Really, what we came around in the study is the fact that it's a really high qualitative format and really sophisticated, making in-game a powerful medium in the advertising landscape.
Those are fantastic stats, Kevin. I know Dentsu has really, done a lot of work within attention, and a lot of what Letitia was saying kind of feeds into that. I'm
Yeah.
curious what the studies that you did with Anzu and the output. What have you found overall?
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap with what Letitia was saying, but our study approached it a little bit differently. And actually, it was kind of like a dream come true for me because I love video games and I love advertising. So I got to lead some cool research last year, and we published this research earlier this year. But some quick background on why we conducted the research. And it all has to do with our attention economy project. And on average, over 4,000 advertising messages hit us daily. So that's a lot. It's literally a battleground for attention. And 6 years ago, Dentsu wanted to understand what types of ads drive the highest attention. And we started to do this using eye tracking technology. We partnered with companies like Lumen and T-Vision to do this. And we called this the Attention Economy Project. And it eventually became the largest eye tracking attention study of its kind. And we did this through partnering with over 30 media partners across every major channel. Your Googles of the world, your Amazons of the world, and of course, Anzu was included in the set. So earlier this year, we published some results from our gaming study, which included the results from Anzu, and they were in good company too. Twitch was there, Activision Blizzard was there. The study is online. Maybe someone can post a link to the chat. And
It's done.
then yep, thank you, thank you. And so what we found was that specifically around intrinsic in-game ads, they delivered nearly 8x the average viewable time compared to our norms. So this is norms across display, social, online video, audio, all those partners that I mentioned earlier. We took the 6 years of research, we generated norms, and the average view time for ads within intrinsic in-game environments, specifically within Anzu, were 8x the average viewable time. So the ads are staying on screen for a long time, which makes sense. You're playing a game and then the ads are appearing during that whole session. So it kind of makes sense. And then when we're looking at attention specifically, because the study was based on attention, we found that the intrinsic in-game ads perform 2x compared to standard display ads. So we thought that was the fairest comparison because we find a lot of teams are buying Anzu inventory like they are display through DSPs. So 2x the attention with the same type of buying door. So it's very interesting, and it's a diversification play at the end of the day. That's how I think about it. I think there was a question about why you would specifically leverage intrinsic in-game in addition to like retail media data. Well, layering that on is a good example of just getting a little bit more scale and diversity. So I think why it's important. I think there's a lot of brands out there that are still buying based on value. They're value-based brands. They're buying on low CPMs. They're buying impressions. But there is this thing called attention, and we've done a lot of studies to prove out what platforms are most effective at driving that. So I think it's worth considering. I'm not asking everyone to buy or plan on attention, although at Dentsu we do have tools and some of our clients do that. But it's certainly worth taking into consideration whenever you're doing all that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, we mentioned the Dentsu report, obviously the Happydemics report. There's also a third report, and this is actually where we started our journey, and that's with Lumen. I won't go into too many details. We've had a lot of stats already, but I'll circle back to a question that came up in the chat as well. But we know that from the Lumen study that 6 in 10 players are likely to make a purchase when they see an intrinsic in-game ad. That's huge. And that really kind of is worth investigating from a metric standpoint when thinking about planning anything in the gaming space. But how do you get started? It's a question that comes up a lot, and I don't know, I'm going to call Prasad out here, because when we started speaking with Prasad and the team about Sony, I remember this conversation vividly. You may not remember, Prasad, but I think one of the first questions you and the team had were like, what games have you got?
Right.
And we were like, well, what games do you want? We got loads of games. We've got games everywhere. But I remember specifically saying to you that it's not just about the game. It's about the audience. It's about who's
Right.
actually playing those games. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, but what games you got? And I remember we sent a games list and you were like, don't want that one, don't want that one, don't want that one. But then we sort of were able to sort of convince you that your audiences were not just playing the games that you traditionally thought your audiences were playing. And that was, a really revolutionary piece because it led us to be able to build quite a successful campaign for
Right.
Sony based on audiences where they are, where they're playing, rather than assuming where you think they're going to be. And that is a very key piece of combining intrinsic in-game with programmatic that, allows you to be able to think through how to achieve some of these results. When it comes to choosing a partner, we see it time and time again that people just go with the partner that's got the game that they know or recognize. But guess what? You may not be the average demographic that plays that game, so you're not going to know that game. Now, there are plenty of games in the Anzu portfolio that I haven't heard of, but have huge monthly active users and have huge highly engaged users and players that I've never even heard of it. But why wouldn't you want to include that in your plan if it's going to help you achieve the metrics that have been set out? So I think it's very important to think through the audience, how to activate, and of course, using some of the guidance that we've been able to demonstrate through these reports can kind of lead you to where to partner. Finally, what I would say is that it's about the relationship, right? You've got your client objectives, you know roughly what you want to do in the gaming space, and you know that you've selected a partner. But if you don't have a partner that can provide that managed service for the first time, talk you through the different creative iterations or considerations, the different targeting objectives, different price points, all of that needs to be done in partnership with a partner that's willing to hold your hand through that process. We see it time and time again where clients will go, I want to build a huge activation in a world as their first ever foray into gaming. And that's extremely expensive and time consuming and really isn't the best way to enter into the gaming space. So having a sort of crawl, walk, run framework with a partner that can handhold you through that process is incredibly important when thinking about selecting the right partner. So that would be just like my top tips. And certainly that was what led to the success that we had with Prasad and his team for Sony. We stayed very close to that particular campaign. We even took some of the existing assets and gamified them for the gaming environment and the games that we had. So I think that is a key part. And to say thank you to Alexandra for that question, because I think it's very important when we think about how to get started.
Prasad, do you want to?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think you bring up a really important point about the creative, right? So I believe you can't just run any creative directly. Let's say if you have a social campaign and you run those creative on your in-gaming environment, that's not going to work, right? So you need to really repurpose your creatives, adapt them towards the gaming environment. I believe for Sony's campaign, as you mentioned, we use Anzu's creative services to basically repurpose them. Those creators were really but the key messaging was really simple. It was mainly focused on the product naming, the logo, very neon-like colors were used to make sure they are, attractive enough. Also, so we were running this for a product named InZone, and this is pretty famous within the gaming community because it's a Sony's product and it's called InZone. So our creative was mainly about talking about the InZone brand and the Sony brand, and that's what was really highlighted in the creative. I believe being subtle messaging is the key here, which really helps during between the gaming environment.
So we have about 7 minutes left. We could have easily used another hour, but we have 7 minutes left. So my last question to all of you is, and several of you have dropped in best practices and stuff like that as you were discussing the distinction between gaming, in gaming, intrinsic in gaming, the attention economy, blah, blah, blah. One is, what have been some of the best practices you've seen when it comes to integration? And second, and probably more important, what are some common pitfalls to avoid? Prasad and Narissa, you mentioned creative and one. Would love for you, both of you, and then Letitia and Kevin, also for you to sort of dial into that so that people listening in can take away best practices and also stuff that they probably should stay away from as they're experimenting in gaming to some extent.
And just jumping in regarding what Prasad just said, it's really interesting. It's also a great way to start. It's to indeed focus on the creative development, because we know at Happydemics, and we can see it clearly in our benchmark, that measurement shows clearly how strong creative is, and it's crucial because it's really tied up with the effectiveness of the campaign. You mentioned, Prasad, you mentioned Sony and its successful campaign. It
Right.
provided for us valuable guidelines because, as you said, having the product prominently at the center of the ad, having a large and recognizable logo and a straightforward design, it really led to an impressive gain in terms of brand image and consideration. So for Happydemics benchmark, it was within the top 5% thanks to this great creative. We know that creative diagnosis is highly correlated with the impact. So the more efforts are invested into refining the creative, the greater the impact that there will be afterwards.
Just to add on to that, right? I think the creative shouldn't really be distracting. Otherwise, the gamers would really not like the whole experience and leave the game altogether. And I believe that's not good for the brand, right? So I believe, again, I think subtlety is the key here.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with all that. And we saw similar results with our attention economy study. We were looking at creative a lot because it's so important. And really, what all of you have said about the prominent branding in the middle, less distractions, the better, because you don't really know what environment the ad will appear in. It could be a racing game, which is pretty fast paced. It could be a puzzle game, which is a little slower. So a static banner with prominent branding in the middle, very safe bet. And then you can explore from there. But really, you don't have to always create custom creative for these types of activations. You can borrow creative from different campaigns, from social campaigns, even from out-of-home campaigns, or whatever your teams have access to. But do make sure it follows the guidelines we've laid out because it's very important. Because at the end of the day, like I mentioned, you just don't know what environment it's going to show in. The gaming environments can vary widely. And yeah, you want to make sure that people see what you're advertising clearly.
Narissa, did you have?
No, I think they covered it. They did a great job. I mean, what I will say, though, is the IB have published creative guidelines, so you can find those quite easily and use those as a framework for succeeding in game.
Yeah. Just to summarize, I think education, integration, the media team within an agency or the buy side that's focused on gaming, extending its extending into the broader media team and really helping the broader buy side figure out how to engage with gaming as part of the broader media mix will probably will slowly allow for better engagement in the media buying itself. So the work that Kevin, you and Prasad are doing is really very important in terms of bringing the advertising community into the gaming ecosystem. Letitia, the stats you shared, and I have to go back and read that study which was posted in the chat. 110 different it's a big number, and so I just wrote 8x. I have to go now and add additional notes, but that's a pretty significant lift across the board. And Narissa, to your point about standardization, I couldn't agree more, because I think the more it gets standardized, the easier it is for a team to start including in the media mix overall. Instead of saying, here's my 90%, and oh, by the way, here's my 5% budget, let me see what I can do within gaming. That doesn't really help given the size and scale and scope of gaming overall. So we are at time. So I want to thank all of you for this excellent discussion. And I know the Anzu team is going to share the recording with everyone who attended and registered. So hopefully we can continue this discussion at a later time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So much.